There is a partial verdict in the Diddy case. After 2 days, the jury has reached unanimous decisions on 4 of the 5 counts.
The problem is that 5th count means that we don't get to find out what the verdicts are on the other 4 because they are hung up on...
The story they have been trying to sell us for years is simple. Jeffrey Epstein ran his operation, Sean Diddy Combs ran his, and whatever connected them was just coincidence, proximity, or social overlap. But now, with more than 20,000 pages of Epstein emails landing on Capitol Hill in November 2025, and a split verdict in Diddy's high-profile federal trial arriving days before, we are suddenly staring at a very different possibility. We are looking at a picture where Diddy is not just another powerful name in the same orbit, but allegedly the operator who kept a dangerous playbook alive after Epstein was gone, using the same leverage-first mentality, the same private environments, and, if insiders are right, possibly even the same archive of compromising material.
Dishonest, violent, horrible. A promiscuous swinger who lied to and cheated on multiple partners. Incredibly, that's how Sean Diddy Combs' own lawyers described the billionaire music mogul, currently facing serious trafficking charges in a New York court.
We have Joe Rogan's camp quietly pushing one explosive idea in early 2025, that Diddy did not just move in parallel to Epstein, he allegedly worked for him, learned from him, and then kept the business model going when the financier was found in his New York cell in 2019. In this framing, Diddy is not a rival gatekeeper of the entertainment world, but the field manager, the contractor who handled the frontline operations, while Epstein stayed in the shadows, nurturing politicians and billionaires. Rogan's sources, according to people familiar with his circle, go even further, hinting that Diddy could be exposed to a lifetime behind bars if hundreds of uncharged incidents ever make it into a new indictment. And all of this is landing exactly as Congress drops a fresh tranche of Epstein communications that show, in plain, messy text, how comfortable he was talking about leverage and presidential vulnerability. To understand why that claim hits so hard in late 2025, we have to look at timing. On one side, House Democrats and House Republicans just dropped competing caches of Epstein emails, spanning from 2008 to 2019, including that now famous January 2019 message where he wrote that Trump knew about the girls, and a 2011 note to Ghislaine Maxwell calling Trump the dog that hasn't barked. On the other, Diddy's federal trial wrapped, with jurors unable to agree on racketeering conspiracy, but still convicting him on transportation-related counts that could send him to prison for years. Put those events in the same week, in the same news cycle, and we can see why Rogan's people are willing to say on the record that we are not dealing with 2 separate scandals, but with one machinery, adapted over time and laundered through entertainment.
They charge.
And a lot of people saying it's square peg, round hole, that we know that there are multiple jurors on both sides. It's not just one holdout, that on racketeering, they are stuck. But they have reached a decision on trafficking as it results with...
When we read Epstein's emails, released in waves by the House Oversight Committee, the first thing that jumps out is not just the content, it is the tone. From 2011 to 2019, he types like a man who truly believes nothing will ever touch him. Lowercase, odd punctuation, glaring typos left uncorrected even when he is talking about Trump's fixer flipping or hinting at compromising material. Commentators have pointed out that this is more than sloppiness. It is a display of arrogance from someone flying between palatial homes and private jets, so insulated he does not bother to clean up messages that could one day be read on the House floor. That arrogance is crucial because it explains why he was comfortable hinting that he could take down a sitting or future president, and why he did not seem worried those words might surface later in a subpoena. Meanwhile, the 20,000-plus pages released by Republicans show us a man curating news digests, tracking Trump's political fortunes, and even emailing himself about a worker at Mar-a-Lago whose testimony could confirm Trump's presence around his properties. In one 2019 self-addressed email, Epstein writes that an employee worked at Mar-a-Lago, that Trump came to my house many times, and that the houseman, Juan Alessi, had already confirmed key details in sworn testimony. These details matter because they show how Epstein thought in systems, staff, witnesses, leverage, and above all, documentation. This was not someone afraid of leaving a trail. This was someone who believed the trail itself was another tool in his arsenal.
That he has, with others, and just because no one else has been charged, which normally in a RICO case, you would have others charged. It was a statute that designed to get mob bosses. trying to get at criminal behavior that's like a web of criminal behavior that you can't necessarily prove like the one thing or the statute of limitations expired on the other thing, but you're just showing this bad guy who's operating what's clearly an enterprise that over and over engages in criminal problems or criminal acts.
Now we jump forward to 2025 and look at how Diddy's operation has been described in court, and we start to see why conspiracy forums are drawing straight lines between the two men. In a sweeping RICO indictment, prosecutors argued that the same empire that made Combs a near billionaire was also used as an engine for intimidation, elaborate multi-day freak-off gatherings, and tightly managed silence. Witnesses in New York federal court described 4-day marathons in LA hotel suites, with commercial participants flown in, taped, and coordinated by assistants, security, and travel staff. One hotel employee under immunity told jurors he was paid around $100,000 for surveillance footage showing Combs assaulting his then-partner in 2016. A payout that looks, on paper, very much like a hush arrangement tied directly to recording hardware and image control. That is where the comparison becomes more than vibes. Epstein's island and townhouses were reportedly wired with cameras. The mythology surrounding him is built on the idea of hidden recordings, guest logs, and unseen drives filled with powerful people in compromising positions. Prosecutors at the Diddy trial did not argue a blackmail list, but jurors still heard story after story about cameras, hotel security feeds, and assistants scrambling to secure or erase digital traces after violent episodes. When we place those narratives side by side, we can see why Rogan's insiders are asking a simple question. If Epstein was the architect of an industrial-scale leverage system, who better than a hyper-connected music mogul like Diddy to act as the contractor running field operations among celebrities?
In the moment, it just felt like, what? Like, is this fun for him? Is this like a test?
We also need to talk about lists. The DOJ, under Trump's second administration, released a 2-page memo in 2025 insisting that there was no incriminating client list in the Epstein review, no credible evidence of blackmail of prominent individuals, and no reason to pursue uncharged third parties. The message was blunt. The most feared document on the internet simply did not exist, and the matter was closed. But at almost the same moment, inside a Manhattan courtroom, prospective jurors in Diddy's case were handed a list of more than 100 celebrities and venues, from Ye and Kid Cudi to Michael B. Jordan, Britney Spears, Rihanna, and even British royals, not as accused participants, but as potential witnesses to his lifestyle and alleged enterprise. The prosecution kept its focus narrow, centering on 4 women labeled Victims 1-4. Yet the shadow hanging over the trial was bigger than that. Reporters highlighted how this juror list looked, at least optically, like the entertainment version of the fantasy Epstein roster that was supposedly hiding in some sealed vault. No one was saying those names had done anything illegal, but everyone understood why it mattered that an entire slice of Hollywood and music had at one time circled Diddy's orbit, attended his white parties, or crossed his path at festivals and premieres. When we remember that Epstein once offered a journalist images of Trump with young women in bikinis in his kitchen, we can see how both stories, officially separate, are soaked in the same atmosphere of cameras, private environments, and value stored in what those images might someday be worth. Then there are the contradictions in the official narrative. In the Epstein memo, the DOJ went out of its way to say there was no credible evidence of a power-leveraging ring, even as it released more than 10 hours of jail cell door footage from the night before his reported self-inflicted passing, footage that mysteriously skips 1 minute and 12 seconds. When pressed, Attorney General Pandy chalked the gap up to a routine nightly reset of an old recording system dating back to the late 90s, insisting that every night would show the same missing minute. That explanation, intended to close the book, instead handed conspiracy forums a visual symbol of missing time, missing data, and possibly missing accountability.
Diddy claimed that somebody held a knife to his throat. He woke up and this guy basically had him and he had the knife, and Diddy was at this person's mercy. Now, it's unclear what exactly happened from there. Was there a guard that came in? Did Diddy somehow fight this person off? Well, it seems unlikely that happened. Or did the person just leave? Bottom line, this guy, at least according to people close to Diddy and Diddy himself, could have hurt him badly or even taken his life.
In Diddy's world, we see a mirrored pattern. His lawyers have said in court and in statements that the federal case treated ridiculous claims as if they were real, and that by doing so, the government was feeding conspiracy culture and making a fair trial impossible. They have conceded that Combs could be volatile, that he used substances heavily, that he indulged in intense, taboo-pushing encounters, but they insist that this was about flawed private relationships, not a structured criminal enterprise. Yet witness after witness mapped out a hierarchy that looked, to many observers, exactly like a corporate version of an old-school crime family. Assistants buying supplies, security enforcing rules, staff coordinating travel, and everyone understanding that if you pushed back too hard, your career in that ecosystem might be over. At this point, insiders close to Rogan say the podcaster has seen or been briefed on materials that go beyond what made it into the indictment. The rumor inside certain Los Angeles and Miami circles is that there are hard drives and backups, possibly inherited from a previous network, containing footage and correspondence that reach far beyond the 4 named accusers. According to these sources, some of that material allegedly traces back to shared environments, shared properties, or shared intermediaries between Epstein and Diddy, the kind of connective tissue that would be explosive if ever authenticated in a courtroom. The implication is brutal. If Diddy really did inherit more than a mindset from Epstein, then anyone captured in those files would have a powerful motive to keep certain cases limited, certain memos narrow, and certain definitions of no evidence as tight as possible.
People I don't think realized was he had cameras all over the place, unbeknownst to them. And now he has all that footage, supposedly. This is what I'm told. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens if, you're a huge, iconic, TV star or movie star, and you're in some...
We also cannot ignore the political backdrop. In late 2025, as emails about Trump, Virginia Giuffre, and Prince Andrew are poured over in the press, Congress is pushing an Epstein Files Transparency Act to force the Justice Department to release all remaining documents. Survivors like Annie Farmer are publicly saying that every new disclosure only raises more questions, and that small, cherry-picked releases are not enough. At the same time, the White House is dismissing parts of the story as a manufactured hoax weaponized by opponents, while Trump himself goes on Truth Social to call Epstein coverage a distraction from other crises. That tug of war over narrative control mirrors exactly what we see in the Combs saga, where each new civil suit, each leaked video, and each celebrity name fuels another wave of speculation that his trial was only a narrow slice of a 2-decade pattern. When we step back, we are left with a timeline that refuses to behave like 2 clean, separate scandals. Epstein's emails show him discussing Trump's vulnerability, strategizing with journalists like Michael Wolff, and quietly advising figures like Lord Peter Mandelson as late as 2016. Diddy's indictment and trial testimony show him using his label, his touring machinery, and his inner circle to organize elaborate freak-offs, to move people across state lines, and to erase digital traces when violence spilled into public view. The DOJ tells us there was no client list, no blackmail matrix. Yet Diddy's jurors are handed a roster of A-listers and told they might hear those names as context for his operation. All while Rogan's camp whispers that the real secret is not who was at which party, but who is still terrified of what might be sitting on a server copied years ago from a disgraced financier's archive, waiting for the wrong person to plug it in.
So why should I care? He did a whole lot of a whole lot of people. And now he's paying for it. So all these cats, I guess y'all get y'all visitation rights. Some of y'all can get y'all conjugal visits right with them.
The DOJ closed Epstein's case. The jury split on Diddy's. But the one thing neither trial answered: what happened to the infrastructure, the recordings, the payoffs, the network of people who made it all possible? Because when we listen closely to the filings, to the leaks, to the quiet statements from former staffers, we hear the same echo over and over. The machinery didn't vanish. It just went offline, rebranded, redistributed into private hands where subpoenas and cameras have a harder time reaching. We have watched this pattern before. Epstein's 2008 non-prosecution deal in Florida was not just a legal miracle. It was a test run in how influence could bend the system around one man without ever admitting how many others were shielded. He walked away with a slap on the wrist, a work release arrangement, and a sealed understanding that protected potential co-conspirators, a phrase that now reads like a ghost signature on every big-name rumor that followed. Years later, Diddy stands in a New York courtroom facing a sweeping RICO theory and still walks out with a partial acquittal. Jurors hung on the enterprise charge, convictions clipped to transportation and conduct, the broader story of a possible network left technically unproven, strategically unanswered.
Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock is ticking on Diddy because on Friday he finds out what his sentence is going to be, but today he found out what prosecutors would like that sentence to be, and it is vastly different from what his attorneys have suggested to the judge. Prosecutors want him to do 11 years, just over 11 years.
We can see the psychology in both arcs. Epstein cultivated the image of the untouchable financier, the man who knew where the secrets were buried, because he helped organize the parties and the introductions. He played soft-spoken host, while his paperwork, his emails, his so-called little black books did the heavy lifting in the background. Diddy, in contrast, built a persona as the loud ringmaster, the ultimate showman, the mogul whose parties were legend, and whose temper was part of the myth. Prosecutors painted him as someone who mixed charm with menace, apologies with payouts, public contrition with private warnings. Different styles, same outcome. Both men used money, status, and access, not just to live large, but to keep people quiet and keep the narrative under control. When we put their legal strategies side by side, the similarities become even harder to ignore. Epstein's lawyers leaned on secret agreements, backroom discussions, and a state-level deal that even some federal officials claimed they did not fully understand until years later. Diddy's camp flooded the zone with high-profile defense attorneys, image consultants, and settlement talks stretching back long before the indictment, folding civil deals, NDA language, and quiet payoffs into a larger effort to paint every accuser as confused, opportunistic, or manipulated. In both cases, the system did not just judge the facts, it negotiated with them, trimming charges here, redefining conspiracy there, until the picture that reached the public looked smaller and safer than the one insiders describe. Then we reach the prisons, the place where, in theory, the story is supposed to end. Epstein was found in his cell, with one missing chunk of surveillance footage and a medical ruling of self-harm that half the internet still does not believe. Those missing 70-plus seconds have become their own character in this saga, a hole in the tape that people project everything onto, from simple technical error to the ultimate cover-up. Diddy, on the other hand, checks into Fort Dix with an assignment that sounds more like a corporate retreat than a fall from grace. Chaplain's assistant, light duty, combined with a slot in a rehabilitation program that lets him present himself as a man working on his inner demons, rather than serving time for a predatory pattern.
Diddy, obviously just starting out his time, well, not just starting out, but starting out his official sentence since being sentenced not too long ago. And I think suffice to say, it's not going well so far.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's got 4 years and change that he's going to ultimately have to serve, although he has served already a year as he awaited his trial and then went through his trial.
So we have to ask the question hanging in the air. One man's story ends with a controversial ruling of self-harm and a camera glitch. The other man's ends, at least for now, with a spiritual-sounding job and carefully curated rehab updates. Coincidence? Or is this how the system signals which names are still useful, which archives are still valuable, which people are still plugged into something bigger than their own case file? A former federal staffer who worked in corrections policy told one outlet that high-value inmates are often placed where information flow can be managed. And whether or not that line was about Diddy, it lines up uncomfortably well with what we are seeing. And then there is the matter of lists. Because in stories like this, lists are never just lists. For years, we heard about Epstein's supposed client list, the mythical roster that would finally explain why so many powerful people seemed nervous every time his name came up. The official word now is that the list, as the internet imagined it, never existed. That the records were messy, incomplete, more chaos than conspiracy. Yet, in Diddy's trial, in black and white, jurors were given a sheet with over 100 names tied to his world. Chart-topping artists, actors, athletes, even minor royals, not accused of anything, but flagged as potential witnesses to the culture he built.
A former assistant to Sean Diddy Combs speaking out in a new interview with new allegations about wild parties and...
So what was that document, really? A simple jury aid, a memory jogger, or a discrete map of who had been close enough to see the edges of the operation, without necessarily touching its core. We have heard from one former road manager who claims that names were a kind of insurance policy, that keeping track of who owed favors, who enjoyed the perks, who saw the chaos and kept coming back, created its own silent leverage. If that is even partly true, then Diddy's list was not just a guest list or a contact sheet. It was a ledger of loyalty and fear, a reminder of who might talk, who might stay quiet, and who might have to pick a side if more files ever surface. This is where the alleged overlap with Epstein becomes almost too convenient to ignore. Insiders whisper that long before the raids and the lawsuits, there were couriers moving hard drives between coasts, that backups existed in more than one mansion, more than one storage unit, more than one set of hands. 3 industry veterans insist that a private equity figure linked socially to Epstein bragged years ago that the most valuable asset in the room isn't the art, it's the footage. Now we hear similar stories around Diddy. Private screening rooms, encrypted backups, moments where staff were told to leave devices in bowls at the door while someone else's camera stayed on. And yet, officially, the trail keeps going cold. We are told Epstein's files are gone, damaged, or tied up in so many layers of legal and bureaucratic knots that the public may never see more than a curated drip. We are told that in Diddy's case, investigators seized devices, reviewed what they could, built charges around 4 central stories, and set the rest aside as either unrelated, inadmissible, or too tangled to prosecute. At the same time, uncharged individuals continue to hold executive positions, sit on boards, greenlight projects, and fund campaigns, as if nothing in their inboxes or address books could ever boomerang back on them. That is when the whispers about a shared network stop sounding like fringe fantasy and start feeling like a plausible reading of the gaps. If Epstein really did mentor, or at least enable, a group of spotlight-friendly operators to keep the party going while he focused on politics and finance, then Diddy fits a pattern. The charismatic frontman with a reputation for excess. The one who can always fill a room with stars and smoke and plausible deniability. If that is true, then the most important question is not what Epstein and Diddy did together years ago. It is who, right now, still benefits from whatever leverage they collected. Whoever still has a quiet interest in making sure some names stay rumors and never become defendants. We can feel that unresolved tension in every new disclosure. Each time another batch of emails hits the news, or another sealed motion in Diddy's case is unredacted, we get a little more detail and a lot more questions. A CEO suddenly retires early. A politician stops taking certain donations. A festival drops a headliner without explanation. On the surface, these are ordinary moves in a volatile industry. But when we place them on the same timeline as raids, subpoenas, and settlement talks, the pattern starts to look less like coincidence and more like quiet damage control for people who still fear what might be on a hard drive in someone else's closet. And that brings us to the most uncomfortable possibility of all, that this was never just about two individuals, never just about one island or one penthouse or one string of luxury hotels. It was about a system that knows how to survive the fall of its figureheads, a system that can sacrifice one name, then another, while the real power structure stays intact. Epstein's passing was supposed to close the book. Diddy's trial was sold as the big reckoning. But if the infrastructure, the recordings, the favors, the silent networks of fixers and gatekeepers is still in place, then maybe what we have seen so far is just the system shedding old skin. So we are left with this lingering question hanging over everything. Epstein's passing was supposed to be the end. Diddy's verdict was supposed to be the reckoning. But what if neither of those things were true? What if this was never about two men at all, and always about one machine that is still running, still protected, and still waiting for the perfect moment to remind all of us who is really in control? What do you think? Are we watching the final chapter, or just the trailer for something bigger that has not hit the courtroom yet? Drop your thoughts, your theories, your doubts in the comments, because this story is far from finished. And until the real power behind it is forced into the light, we will be right here, watching with you, and signing off for now with one simple promise. We are not forgetting any of this.